I use they, them pronouns. Thank you, Tanya. I'll start again. My name is Desiree Perez. I'll be one of your trainers today. I am the Senior Data and Research Coordinator with Instituto, and I'll pass it to Kate.
Hi everyone, my name is Kate Botcher. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the data manager with One Arizona.
Awesome. And so in addition to introducing ourselves, we'll introduce our organizations. Instituto is a capacity building organization. So we build sustained political power with communities of color and low-income communities here in Arizona. And we do this by leadership development, essentially, which we are doing incubation and acceleration to again, really build up the leadership of individuals and organizations in this state and who serve this state. Kate, why don't you tell us about One Arizona?
Yes, so One Arizona, we are a coordinating hub for civic engagement efforts across Arizona. Some of you may be member organizations, um, but we bring together dozens of diverse community-based organizations. And with our team, through strategic collaboration, data-informed programming, and long-term commitment to community-led initiatives, we create a culture of civic engagement that endures beyond just our election cycles.
Awesome. Now, before we get into our training content, we are in an election year, so we want to have a disclaimer here. This is a public education training, is a public education offering, and it's facilitated by two 501c3 organizations, Instituto Lab and One Arizona. This training is not executed in coordination with any political party or campaign. And we are not going to be able to discuss any current political campaigns nor offer specific advice to campaigns. So please refrain from talking to staff. And that staff includes not only myself and Kate, but we have Siana, we have Tanya, and we have Isai, who are all here from One Arizona and Instituto. Please refrain from talking to staff about your campaigns or asking for advice specific to your campaign if you're currently running for office. So we can answer general questions about MiniVan, but we want to avoid any kind of campaign coordination as we are 501c3 organizations. With that, we are ready to go. All right. Kate, why don't you take us through our agenda and learning objectives?
Yeah, so for our agenda today on the next slide, we're going to begin with a welcome and grounding. So really understanding why we're here today and what we would like to teach teach with you. Then we'll go into how to create searches and lists before we go into a group activity. We'll have a break in the middle of today's session, and then we'll go into how to create a script as well as an activity to practice that. And then we'll close out with a survey and an opportunity for you to ask any questions before we close out. And our learning objectives today. So the first is we're hoping to break down barriers and gatekeeping around MiniVan for anyone who may be new to working on field and data and or maybe usually Canvas, but you've never created a Canvas before in Van or MiniVan. So we're hoping to help with that. Next, we want to help strengthen understanding of MiniVan and how all the components of a Canvas come together on the back end to help provide a high-level overview of how canvassing data is collected, stored, and used. Then we'll also provide support and resources for all of you to advance in your campaigns and careers. And then lastly, we'll answer some common questions around the technical components of building a Canvas. And with that, I will pass it to Desiree for some grounding.
Uh, Amazing. So I want to start with like, why are we focusing on minivan and canvassing for today's training? And that's because canvassing is one of the best ways, if not the best way, to engage our communities. Because when we are canvassing, what we're doing is we're meeting people where they're at. We're literally going to their homes, knocking on their doors, and having face-to-face conversations with our neighbors and community members. And so that's why we really want to support the canvassing efforts for folks here in Arizona. As I said, canvassing engages our communities where they're at. But I also want to talk to y'all about MiniVan. So MiniVan is an add-on tool to your van, smart van, etc., like NGP van tool. It's an add-on. You can use it to create, launch, and complete canvassing campaigns. Your staff and volunteers are able to download the free MiniVan app, even if they don't have access to your van committee, and they are able to then participate and facilitate your canvasses through the free MiniVan app. Now, you might not have MiniVan yet, and if you do, you might not have access to the back end and all the stuff that we are going to cover today. But our goal is to help you understand how the tool works so that you are empowered to advocate for your needs and your community's needs. And also what we hope to do is like we said, build leadership, right? We are here to do leadership development. So we want to make sure that we're helping also strengthen your own familiarity with the procedures so that you can advance not only your campaign work, but your careers. And so we're going to start by talking about lists and searches. Searches and lists are about who we center in our campaigns, right? So if canvassing provides a way for us to connect with our community, it gives us a chance to share important information, and it helps us encourage our community members to take action. Well, if we're going to do that, the first step is to figure out who we're trying to reach. And that's where lists and searches come in. When we are deciding, like, who is it that we should talk to, that's defining our target universe. Let's get a show of hands in the chat and reactions on Zoom of people who've heard the term target universe before. All right, seeing some hands. All right. Yeah, so our target universe, you can't talk to everybody when you are running a campaign. We don't have unlimited time and resources, right? But you also don't need to talk to everybody. Usually there is I see Zoe just built their first target universe last week. Congratulations. And then Jose, don't worry, I'm defining target universe for you right now. But a target universe is going to be that group of people who are either directly impacted by our issues or who we need to take a particular action, right? So, for example, if we wanted to register first-time voters, what groups of people would you want to reach? And feel free to come off mute or drop in the chat some types of folks that you would say, hey, I really should make an effort to reach these people if I'm trying to register first-time voters. And I'll give folks just a minute to think through it and drop their recommendations in the chat or come off mute and share. People just turning 18. Totally. They probably, all right. They probably haven't been registered to vote before, right? I was doing this thought exercise as we were building this training, and I was like, okay, if I was trying to register first-time voters, there are a few people I would talk to. I would probably look at people who haven't voted in any elections. So in Van, it would be people who voted in 0 elections. Maybe people who, when I checked their voter registration status, was either unregistered or not registered, and not enough info. And I would probably also look at people who are between 18 to 21 years old to try and find those people who were not registered voters yet so I could help them get registered. But when I built this search, I did it in one step. I was like, okay, I want this person with these qualities. And my search results came back as 0. Does anybody have an idea of why that happened? And it's because I built it all in one step. If all of that criteria is not met, the size of your list is going to be 0. So what it looked like is I was like, okay, I want voted in 0 elections and unregistered and not registered and not enough info and 18 to 21 years old. And there is not a space in this search for like overlap. But there is a way you can reach all these people. So we're going to talk about add, remove, and narrow. These are steps you can use in Van to build your lists and your search. So add, right? What is your list going to look like? Let's say you want to find 18 to 21-year-olds and unregistered voters. You would first start with the 18 to 21-year-olds, and then you would add a step, and then you would say, and unregistered. And then that is the size of your list. And so what is narrow, right? So if I was narrowing, I could say like, okay, I want to start with 18 to 21-year-olds. And I want to narrow them to also be unregistered. So then when I narrow, I would first start with that 18 to 21-year-olds, add a step, narrow, unregistered. And then this wedge in here of unregistered 18 to 21-year-olds would be my list. And then what about remove? Well, let's see. So if I had that list of, okay, I want that segment of my target universe that is 18 to 21-year-olds who are unregistered, but I'm working in rural Arizona. I don't want people in Maricopa. There's plenty of other organizations that are working on it. My organization is working, let's say, in Yavapai and Coconino. I want to remove Maricopa County. So they'd be over here. And my list would be unregistered 18 to 21-year-olds, except those in Maricopa County. And so that's just a quick overview of add, narrow, and remove. And again, if your list is too specific, there will be a small number of people in it. And even though that can be a good case sometimes, like maybe you want to build a very specific list for a last minute, bit of advocacy outreach. You want to only reach out to 100 people because you know those 100 people are going to do the thing you need, and that's all you need. But when you're canvassing, you want to make sure your turf is dense enough that there are plenty of doors for you to knock on. So, you want to find that balance with building your list for adding, narrowing, and removing folks to get a good size list. And now I want to do a quick overview of models and scores. So another way to find our people is to use the scores that are created and provided by organizations like Target Smart, Catalyst, Haystack. These often help build or post the voter files that we have access to through Van, Smart Van, NGP Van. And these models are built using things like consumer data, census data, and voter file data that these companies get from our Secretary of State's office. And they are behavior models. So they're meant to predict either somebody's behavior or somebody's attitude toward an issue. And the scores assigned to people through these models is how it's going to indicate how likely they are to either be the thing or feel this certain way about a thing. So for example, scores in the high range, it's going to give you like a 0 to 100. Scores in the high range, let's say like 80 to 100, indicate a high level of likelihood that a person is going to behave or feel a certain way. Whereas scores in that low range, right, say 20 to 0, are going to indicate that people have a very low likelihood of being or feeling a certain way. Um, I think the important thing to note is that middle scores, I think we mostly think that middle scores are like moderate, but not when you're talking about models and scores here. That actually means that we don't have enough information to know if a person leans one way or another. So that range kind of between, 40 and 60 is we don't have enough information about this person to know how they feel about this issue or if they are this certain characteristic. Let's see. Here are some examples of um, scores that you can use to build your searches and lists in SmartVan. So you can say like, oh, I want to talk to people who have, um, uh, strong feelings about climate change. So I'm going to narrow my list to people who are between like 70 and 100 when it comes to their target smart climate change score. Or, oh, I'm, working on something that's relevant to homeowners. I want to make sure that that score is between 78 to 100. Or conversely, you might say, oh, I really want to talk to renters, so I'm going to look for people who have a low home ownership score from 0 to maybe like 25, 0 to 30. That's going to be people that I want to talk to. And so this is what it will look like when you're in Van, and you're going to be able to come in here and decide the range of the score that you want to search for. Let's see. So again, for example, an early vote score, a high score would indicate that a person is likely to vote early. A low score would indicate that they are unlikely to vote early. A working class score, a high score would indicate that that person is very likely to be working class. And a low score would indicate that they're unlikely to be working class. And other scores include things like race, religious affiliation, gun ownership, marriage equality support, abortion support, education level, veteran status. And for C4 organizations, you might also have access to party affiliation scores, candidate support scores, partisanship scores, and more. Now, I did say that there were race models. I do want to make a note that race models are notoriously inaccurate because they mostly rely on what a person's last name is. And voter files are usually built with Eurocentric naming conventions in mind. So when I put like, oh, I am looking for BIPOC, I really want to reach out to low income communities and communities of color in Arizona, because that's what Instituto's, mission is. If I was like, oh, I want to search for people, the race score might say, well, this is Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Like, this is who we expect, Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie. This is Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And that might be leaving out Mr. and Mrs. Smith, who I want to talk to, from the reboot of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Donald Glover and all them. But please keep in mind again that the race ethnicity scores are kind of unreliable, and you have to find more creative ways to find your people, besides just relying on the race model. And yeah, and you can filter down to a score range for all propensity levels. I think so. Jose, actually, can you say a little bit more about what you mean for that?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out like I'm very inexperienced with minivan. This
Yeah.
is why I'm here, but I'm trying to figure out how you can filter down to like low propensity voters. I remember on a campaign where I did like the campaign finance reporting, but I talked to the canvassers, and one of the big successes on that campaign was low propensity voters. And we were flipping those into the one vote, then the two vote, then we were getting the household of their relative down the street. And it was like a big opportunity, and it led to to a historic win. And I want to be able to like filter down very specifically to something like that.
Yeah, yeah. So are um there are scores inside of MiniVan for like likelihood to vote in a primary election or likelihood to vote in a midterm election. And you can adjust those scores so to find those people who are unlikely to do those. So it is possible to use scores to find um, that kind of information for sure. Oh, I forgot to replace this screenshot because it's pixelated. But once you've kind of built your search and you're like, these are my people, this is who I want to talk to, it's gonna give you an opportunity to save um, that criteria that as a list or a search. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the difference between the two. So once you find your people and you're like, all right, I want to save this. This is what it's going to look like in Van. It's going to give you these two options. Which one do you use? Well, searches are dynamic. And what that means is if you save it as a search, every time you load it, anybody who meets those criteria is going to be on your list. It's going to include fresh people all the time. Anyone who then like meets your criteria, even if they weren't in Van last week, if they're in Van this week, they're going to be on your list. So it's going to pull an up-to-date list of anyone who meets your search criteria, whereas lists are static. Maybe there is a group of 500 people that you're like, we are going to just talk to these 500 people multiple times throughout the course of this campaign that we're working on. And we want to see how these 500 people behave or how their answers change. And we want to keep it limited to this group of folks. A list is going to be a better option for that because it's static. No new people are going to get added to it. It's going to be the same thing, whether you pull it yesterday, whether you pulled it a week ago, whether you pull it a month ago, whether you pull it 2 weeks in the future. It's going to be static. So it's only going to have those five. All right. Before we jump into a group activity, I just want to see how folks are feeling about what we covered so far. You know, give me a thumbs up in the chat if you're feeling pretty good about how you're doing, if everything's making sense. Give me maybe like a question mark in the chat if you're kind of with us, but you know, you're gonna need a little bit more need a little bit more time to really process this. All right, I'm seeing some thumbs up. All right, and then our friends here, Tanya, Isai, Siana, are going to drop the list building exercise in the chat for y'all. And I am going to pull it up on my screen. Actually, I think I have guidance here. Great. So Tanya just dropped a link in the chat for y'all. This is going to be a list building exercise. So in just a moment here, Kate is going to move us into some breakout rooms. And what I'd like you to do in your breakout room is work together to pretend you're part of the same organization and you're trying to make voting as easy and accessible for your community as possible by signing people up for the automatic early voting list. You can use to build your search or your list any criteria that you can imagine you might have access to in your voter file. So don't get caught up on the technicals of like, oh, I don't know exactly what exists in MiniVan or Van. Just focus on the exercise of like, who would I want to talk to? How might I, find those people? And we're going to work together to build a practice list or a search. So let me go back. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go ahead and what's this little spelling exercise? Y'all should be able to have access to this. Please let me know in the chat if you don't. I'm going to go ahead and Kate, if you want to go ahead and open some breakout rooms, I'll get the music going again. We'll push y'all into the breakout rooms. You'll have about 5 minutes to work with each other, and then we'll come back and we'll do like a 5-minute share out. Actually, let's see, what time is it? We're a little ahead of time, so we'll give you an extra 5 minutes. So y'all have 10 minutes in your breakout rooms. And we'll go ahead and come back.
Cool. Okay, great. I love all the cancers in here. I'm a cancer, so
Me too.
I'm feeling that. Okay, so let's get into scripts. So if we go to the next slide. So now that we've identified the people who we know we want to reach during our Create a List activity, let's begin building our Canvas in MiniVan, starting with our script. So before you actually start plugging in the language for your script, it is important to know your why for your Canvas, and also what information and data your team needs and or what actions you would like your community to take. This will help inform what survey questions and activist codes you may need to build prior to the script. So typically we use survey questions to record responses and activist codes to identify if a person is likely to take action, is a volunteer prospect, or is interested in donating to our cause. So when creating scripts, it's also important to know what type of script you would like to build. So a linear script means that a person's response does not change the flow of the conversation, meaning that you will be asking everyone the same set of questions. So in the example on the right, as you can see, all of the questions feed into the same response. So this person is saying, hello, I'm a volunteer helping Arizonans vote. Do you know that election day is Tuesday, November 3rd? This goes directly into the question of asking, do you have a plan to vote? And then that is attached to that survey question, which goes into, do you know where your polling place is this year? And then that goes into, can you help ensure safe elections by volunteering? So all of these connect and they all are in the same line, meaning that every single person that they talk to receives all of these questions. And then this is an example of a branch script. So this does the opposite, where it allows you to change the path of the conversation depending on what the person answers. So let's say I would be asking Desiree, hi, I'm a volunteer helping Arizonans vote. Are you registered to vote at this address?
Yeah, I'm registered to vote at this address.
Great, I would say awesome. And then that, as you can see on the left, goes into election day is Tuesday, November 3rd. Make sure you mail back your ballot, which would lead into that response. And so as you can see, it branches so that you can change your answer depending on how the person responds.
I just realized I forgot to update this. It's supposed to be like, do you get your ballot by mail here? I was gonna be like,
good.
no, I don't have my mail-in ballot. So this question should have said, yeah, are you registered to get your ballot by mail? And I would have said, no, I don't have ballot by mail. And Kate would have said, oh, no problem. Let me get you registered for that.
Yeah, all good. But as you can see, this will branch into each option, and this particular flow is called a branch script. So I know I kind of just yapped a bunch about like the difference, but how are folks feeling about the difference between a linear versus branched? Feel free to drop a thumbs up if you're feeling good. We'll also have an opportunity to kind of practice the difference. We'll see. Got it. Okay, great. So once you've decided on your linear versus branched, then you can begin to construct your scripts. Just wanted to share a quick pro tip is to build your scripts fully in a Google Doc or a similar document so that you can just copy and paste the text directly into the scripts builder in Van. This is also particularly helpful if you have a bilingual team who speaks both English and Spanish. Having it labeled beforehand makes it easier to copy and paste it into the box, and also to ensure that your team understands, the difference of where the language is going. So once you're building your script, you'll have a chance to customize the walk results to fit your campaign's needs. The screenshot you see here located on the left, this is an example of what you'll see next to the script builder as you build it. And these are the options of how you can determine what your canvassers choose as a walk result. So a few questions that are good to ask is, are you sharing data with other organizations who need to use the same walk results and have the same definitions as you? So making sure that your team is on the same page about what each of these means is crucial. A few examples. For example, with inaccessible, this can mean that there's a dog in the yard today, but maybe it's okay to try the house again in the future. But to someone else, it could also mean there's a locked gate that's preventing you from knocking on the door, and you won't be able to access it in future campaign or future canvases as well. Another example is refused. This could mean maybe now's not a good time, come back later, but it could also mean this person does not want to participate at all. Also be aware that certain walk results are considered terminal results. So what this means is marking results like moved, wrong number, deceased, and do not email. This can all indicate bad or wrong data, and it would remove people from all of your lists, meaning that you won't be able to go back to them in the future. So just making sure that you understand the difference in when it would take somebody off of your list. Another thing to note is if your team uses the notes feature during your canvases, sometimes this does mark people as canvassed, and that data can get lost or mislabeled if it is existing in the notes and is not being tagged like of these walk results. So using best practices with your team to avoid coding good contacts as incorrect ones is a good thing to do, and also identifying clear language for each results. This also prevents the need for data cleanup after your canvassing is over.
I do see a question in the chat that I'll jump in on real quick about terminal results. I believe that a terminal result like deceased would impact the entire, voter file. But a terminal result like moved wouldn't necessarily impact that person if they did move states, right? It might remove them from Arizona's voter file, but not impact them in Massachusetts voter file if that's where they moved.
And yes, Jose, if using the notes for additional info, but select the proper result. So yeah, so sometimes in a canvas, there are maybe certain messages or ways that you want to like specify that you had a particular interaction with somebody, but we'll also get more into that later of how that can impact your data. Okay, great. And now we're going to go into actually practicing of creating a script. Let me. Okay, so similar to the previous exercise, what we're going to do is we're going to split you all back into breakout rooms. And here is the exercise. So whether it's because of their work schedules, family responsibilities, access to transportation, or many more, Many people in your community aren't able to vote in person on election day. Your organization wants to make voting as easy and accessible for your community as possible by signing up for the automatic early voting list to receive their ballot by mail. So you've already built your searcher list of the people you want to reach, and now you can craft a script. So it's important to consider the 5 W's and the 1 H as you draft your script. So who, what, where, why, and how. And each question will go into how to think about that for your scripts. It's also good to consider which activist codes and survey questions your organization will want to have in interacting with people. And also thinking about, would this be a linear or branch script, and what the purpose is of how you want to reach your folks. So let me get people into the, okay, breakout rooms.
Of that too, which so thank you for resuming the recording, Danya. There's a data justice component when it comes to your scripts and your relationship with your canvassers that we want to make sure that we have on the record, which, you know, a lot of our canvassers are seasonal workers. A lot of them are first time, this is their first involvement with a campaign. A lot of them, you know, either feel unexperienced or are seen as unexperienced by people who might be higher up in the campaign. It is important, though, to make sure that you are listening to and incorporating their feedback, because their feedback is data. They are the ones who are actually having the conversations with your community, right? They are the ones who are seeing people's facial expressions. They are the ones who are seeing people's attitudes, reactions. If they're coming to you and they're saying, like, I have too many questions in this script. I don't have enough time to get through all of them before people get tired of talking with us. You know, what can we do about that? Then when you are writing scripts, or, you know, your part of this team, whether you're on the data or the field side, it's part of our jobs to take that feedback, to take that data, and then incorporate it and make sure that, you know, we're not just saying, well, you're just a canvasser, you know, you're not making important decisions for this campaign, so we're just not going to listen to you, or we're going to disregard the data that you're giving us. So it is important to think about what they're saying and the experiences that they're having, and use that to help you improve. That said, if you are going to change your scripts based on canvasser feedback, make sure that you're doing it in a way where you can track, when did we change the script? Did the results change when we changed the script? That way you're not just incorporating that data, but you're incorporating it in a way where you can see if it had a positive or a negative impact, or no impact, right? Because they could say, oh, the script's too long, I'm not getting through it. And if you say, okay, we're going to change it on Sunday after the last weekend canvas, and Monday we're going to start fresh with a new script, you will be able then to see, like, oh, they were right. We're getting way more contact, you know, rates. We're getting way more completion, right? We're answering more of the survey questions that we had in our script. We're getting through more of them because we shortened our script. Or, you know, maybe it didn't have a difference, or maybe fewer people are responding to your changed script, but because you'll make that change in a coordinated way where you can track the data, it will help you, you know, to see if it worked or if you need to make further adjustments. All right. That said, does anybody else have any other questions? I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording again. Anybody have any other questions about the exercise before we move into kind of the closing? We're going to have a survey, and then we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A. But anybody have questions about the exercise or reactions to the exercise or learnings from the exercise before we move on? All right, then let me go ahead and resume recording. Oh, actually, we don't need record anymore. We're going to stop recording for